Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in once again to this evening's edition of Tax Watch, brought to you by Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County in partnership with Comcast Cable. I'm Victor Wilhelm, I'm the president of Concerned Taxpayers, and with me today is John Winkler, past president and chair of our candidate committee. Today we're going to be talking to you about our endorsements, who we feel you should consider voting for in the March 22nd election. We'll be talking a little bit about the process that we went through finding who we were going to endorse. Typically on this program we like to bring to your attention upcoming legislation, but because we have the municipal elections coming up, we thought that we would spend some time talking about the endorsements and talking about who we feel will best represent you, the taxpayer, at City Hall. So we looked at the constitutional officers, particularly the mayor and the city council candidates as well. So this will be a very exciting episode for you to watch, and we hope that you share it with your friends and families. We also would like to encourage you to go to our website at www.jackstaxpayers.org, and feel free to call us anytime you like, 904-351-8126. That's 904-351-8126. And so let me introduce you to John Winkler. He's the head of our candidate committee. He will lead us into our first endorsement that we're talking about. It's mayor. I think this is a very important race, probably almost the most important race. So we'll spend some time talking about that in the process. John?
Well, let me say this. We started this process with questionnaires that we sent out to city council candidates back in December. We first sat down, came up with what we consider to be a very objective questionnaire. A copy of it is here behind me, and you can look at the survey that we came up with on our website, which is www.jackstaxpayers.org. The complete process that we went through involved approximately council candidates, nearly all of whom responded. We were able to develop a rough rating system based on that. Subsequently, we had interviews, 4 sessions of interviews. We had 8 members of our committee who interviewed. It took literally between us hundreds of man hours and woman hours in order to conduct the interviews. We then distilled that into a 5,000-word report. Most endorsing agencies just tell you who they recommend that you vote for. We actually give you reasons both for and against candidates in this report. Again, we're going to go through a portion of it here on the show, but we literally don't have time to go through the entire report. So that is also available in the format of a voter's guide, but also as a report on the website jackstaxpayers.org. Let me go ahead and begin with the mayoral endorsement. We actually endorsed Mike Hogan. We have an honorable mention to Warren Lee. But the reason that the taxpayer's choice, in our opinion, is Mike Hogan goes back to a number of things. First of all, he's held years. And while he's generated a number of strong supporters, he's also had a few detractors over that time. I was, in fact, his last opponent for public office for the tax collector 8 years ago. And frankly, in our view, that may lend more weight to this endorsement than many other endorsements, because it's unusual that a defeated former candidate for a post would wind up endorsing his opponent for a higher post 8 years later. We do believe, though, from everything that Mr. Hogan has said to us in our interviewing process, that if he is elected, he will actually walk where he now talks about, fighting government spending increases and the proliferation of costly programs. There are other candidates who promise to do the same. We're not convinced that those candidates would, in fact, do that once they're elected. Mayor Payton made it clear that Mike Hogan was not his pick. ostensibly because Mr. Hogan has always enjoyed labor union support in his campaigns. But we feel that there's more than a little hypocrisy that comes out of the present mayor in criticizing his potential successor for having the same support that he, John Payton, previously enjoyed but has now lost. We disagree that the mere fact that Mr. Hogan has a public safety union endorsement, and in fact since this was written he's obtained the firefighters endorsement as well as the FOP endorsement. We disagree that that disqualifies him from the mayor's office. And we actually find that his past experience in negotiating Communication Workers of America contracts in management brings a useful real-world skill that's lacking in the other candidates. Indeed, Mr. Payton's repeated attacks of Hogan in praise of the two candidates who were former mayoral chiefs of staff, that'd be Audrey Moran and Rick Mullaney, that may be the best standalone reason for a voter to support Mike Hogan instead of either of them. In order to run for mayor, Mr. Hogan is giving up an office with no term limits. That's the tax collector job, where he faced no opposition 4 years ago, was unlikely to ever draw any additional challengers. We really doubt that the modest pay increase he receives as mayor over his tax collector salary would motivate him to run. And at the age of 61, we really doubt that he's planning on using the mayor's office as a stepping stone to run for higher office. So this would be the for over an hour. He was well prepared and articulate and gave us details of how he would achieve specific savings. You can see a video of this interview again at jackstaxpayers.org. Mr. Hogan's prior political experience is all relevant, and unlike Mr. Brown, Ms. Moran, and Mr. Mullaney, it wasn't all in the executive branch as an appointee. He's the only candidate that I'm aware of that has ever had to respond to constituent concerns in a legislative and an administrative capacity. So we find him to be the best fit of the 6 candidates whose names are on the ballot. In that he believes in limited government, doing relatively few things as efficiently as possible, and the concerned taxpayers of Duval County endorses Mike Hogan for mayor of Jacksonville, think he is the smart choice for dealing with the fiscal challenges of the next 4 years. Now, for our reviews of Warren Lee, who was our honorable mention, and the other 4 candidates, all of whom received some sort of written review. Again, go look at jackstaxpayers.org, and we hope to have a published version of the Voter's Guide out very soon.
Thank you, John. You mentioned a few things I just want to touch on before moving into the next endorsement. One was the public safety endorsements of Mike Hogan, and some groups have, and other candidates have say, well, that disqualifies them. I've used a lot of these endorsements are kind of in business decisions by these groups. I think they pick who they think might win, and so I think a lot of it's usually a business decision. And you know, I know when Hogan came into the interview process with us, he spent 70 minutes, and there were some members of the committee that were very skeptical before he came in. And after the end of 70 minutes interviewing Mike Hogan, most of the committee members were very, very impressed and with how they came out, and even going into it very skeptical. So we did spend a lot of time talking to Mike Hogan, and I think that's a really good endorsement. I think you represent the taxpayers the best. And moving right along from his prior job from tax collector, that's who we are going to speak about next. And our recommendation is Dick Kravitz. We believe that Dick Kravitz has a long history as a non-establishment city and state legislature. We feel that he's relatively unbeholden to any special interests, and his past private sector employment in connection with the Jacksonville Suns makes him very responsive to customer concerns. And he also expressed to us that during his, if he is elected to the office of tax collector, that he would use it as quote-unquote a bully pulpit to press local government for smaller budgets and greater efficiencies. Unlike Mr. Corrigan, Dick Kravitz has a solid record of fiscal responsibility in public office. His past performance is a really good guide for future indications of how he'll behave in the office. And as a prior legislature, we believe that his experience makes him able to handle answering to his constituents in a responsive manner. In that race, we also had an honorable mention that went to Ryan Taylor, who we thought he interviewed very well. And we didn't endorse Ryan Taylor, we endorsed Dick Kravitz, but we did give him an honorable mention. And we only gave 4 honorable mentions out of all these races. So in almost an honorable mention might be more distinguished because we awarded less of them than actual endorsements. At least that's how I've been trying to sell it. But that's how Dick Kravitz is who our choice is for tax collector to represent the taxpayers in this race. And moving on to property appraiser, John, would you care to take this one?
Certainly. Let me say one last thing about the tax collector race. That's the only race where a presently sitting city councilman is running. That's Michael Corrigan, and he's concluded in our survey. Mr. Corrigan only scored a 14% out of our survey results. So based on his prior experience as in legislation that involved taxation, we were concerned that it doesn't make a lot of sense to let him now take the job of collecting the taxes that he voted into existence.
Maybe he had his eye on future office to vote in all these taxes so he can become tax collector and collect them.
And hadn't really considered it that way. But now property appraiser is another race where we have 2 candidates. And let me say this, in some of these races, there are members of different political parties. In other races, everybody is a member of the same political party. We have chosen not to indicate or even talk about people's partisan labels. Personally, we believe that the municipal elections probably shouldn't even be partisan races. They are, but literally we have attempted to identify and interview people solely on the basis of who we feel is best for the job and paying absolutely no attention whatsoever to political party. So in the case of property appraiser, we've chosen Jim Overton, who is the incumbent and has held this office for the last 8 years. And we note that our reason for doing so is that we now live in a vastly different world from the booming real estate market of 2003 when he was first elected. And with the uncertainty of the next 4 years, there is a benefit to retaining the services of an assessor who has been administering the tax rolls in both fat times and lean. Jim Overton freely admits that the job of property appraiser is much more complicated than he imagined when he first got elected, and that he also acknowledges he's now better at the job than when he started. And I personally believe that to be true. Since we don't automatically endorse incumbents, and far from it, if you look at some of the other results that we've come up with, we had to take his assertion that he needs 4 more years to achieve optimal efficiencies under advisement. When we interviewed him, he assured us that he would press for legislative ad valorem exemption reform, meaning that he would try to expand the tax base so that we could reduce rates overall. And he referred to the existing system of exceptions and limitations as being unfair. So we concluded that he ought to get an opportunity to address that unfairness, while reminding him that we'll monitor him, as of course the concerned taxpayers will do of all of these candidates. We endorse Jim Overton for property appraiser. If you want to see a review of his opponent, again, look at our website. In the sheriff's race, we have no endorsement, and again, for our reasons and for a discussion of the 3 candidates there, we suggest that you go to our website, www.jacktaxpayers.org.
That's a mouthful. All right, we're running out of time, so we're going to move along through these kind of quickly. John mentioned we didn't endorse in every race. We feel that the endorsement has a lot of value, so we only endorsed the people we felt comfortable with. This next race is a race where we didn't have an endorsement. We actually have an anti-endorsement. This is at-large Group 1. Everybody in Jacksonville will be able to vote in at-large Group 1. And I'm going to go to the anti-endorsement first. David Taylor receives our anti-endorsement. He's only one out of all these races that received an anti-endorsement. And while we respect the constitutional right of Mr. Taylor to be regarded as innocent until proven guilty from some of these allegations, they just cloud his candidacy in this race. There's been repeated quotes in the news media about Mr. Taylor, and so we feel that his position in this race deserves an anti-endorsement, and anybody but him should be elected for this office. There's some allegations made. We encourage you to go to the report that we've issued on the website and read it, and there's some references to the news articles, and you can read for yourselves and determine for yourselves how we came to our conclusion with the anti-endorsement.
Yeah, there should be links that you can go and look at the news articles and read them for yourself from our report.
Yes, there are links to it. There's a Times Union where Mr. Taylor's quoted that he has so many bar complaints they all run together. That's January 27th in the Times Union of 2011. And read the report and you can find out why we are in that position. Steve Burnett in this race, we were concerned over his approval of the mayor's no-bid contract and his opposition to restoring ethics code to the city charter. His interview process couldn't dispel the clouds of uncertainty around his candidacy. Kimberly Daniels in this race, she has strong community support, and we stopped short of an endorsement because she entered the race at the last minute, and we didn't have a full time to evaluate her candidacy, and still have not come to a position on that. So only in at-large Group 1 we have an anti-endorsement for David Taylor. We encourage members to look at Steve Burnett and Kimberly Daniels in this race for who you'd like to vote for. And John, would you care to take us to Group 2?
Certainly. One last remark about Mr. Taylor. The reason he has bar complaints is not because he's an alcoholic. He's a lawyer, and we're talking about complaints to the Florida bar.
Bar, yes, not like paying his tab.
Exactly.
Okay.
City Council at Large Group 2, the taxpayer's choice here is the incumbent, John Gresham-Benny. Our choice for City Council this contest is Mr. Gresham-Benny, whom we endorse. He's always considered the best interest of the taxpayers at large in every official action, and he has the institutional knowledge from having served on the council 8 years prior to his present service, which is 10 years total already. He has the institutional knowledge to continue to serve effectively for years to come. His known incorruptibility, and I think there's no question that he is, if he has a prize, we don't know what it is yet, thank goodness, leads us to reject all the other candidates as unknown quantities. Amazingly, Mr. Gresham-Benny manages to perform his duties responsibly and responsively without using taxpayer funds to employ an assistant. There are only 2 council members out of 19 who do not have a full-time assistant, and Mr. Gresham-Benny is one of them. Of his 3 opponents, only Vince Serrano gets to the starting gate. Tom Patton is a former local public radio and television reporter. We respect for his participation in the process. And unfortunately, we only know Paul Martinez from his return survey questions, which again are available at jackstaxpayers.org.
So Group 3, unopposed incumbent Stephen Juist. Sadly, there's no contest in this race. This is one where Mr. Juist is supported for tax increases. He's opposed the bidding of the landfill contracts, has steak dinners with the lobbyists after the contract was voted through, and other concerns. So anybody that's unhappy with Mr. Juist during the next 4 years need to reflect on the fact that he is unopposed. I'm going to take us into Group 4 and 5 in the interest of time. We have in Group 4, we've co-endorsed Juan Diaz and Jim Robinson. Both Jim Robinson and Juan Diaz express strong fiscal responsibility and impress us as candidates who are prepared to take tough action on the city budget. We cannot recommend Greg Anderson, who did not respond to our questionnaire. So in this race, we co-endorse Juan Diaz and Jim Robinson. In Group 5, we endorse Robin Lum. Mr. Lum impressed us with his knowledge and quick wit combined with his perfect score on our quiz. We endorse Robin Lum in this race with an honorable mention to Fred Ingus. And again, we've only gave 4 honorable mentions, so I think that has a high mark. But again, we recommend Robin Lum for at-large Group 5. We lacked sufficient information for the remainder of the candidates. Michelle Tapini came in for interviews. She struck us as sincere in her efforts, but again, Robin Lum really impressed the committee, and strong endorsement for Robin Lum Group 5.
And that's a race where there's 6 candidates, so it's likely that it's going to go to the second election in May simply because of the numbers there. District contests, these are city council races that only involve people in a district. District 1 and District 2 races are both in the Arlington area. Our choice in District 1 is Clay Yarborough. Clay Yarborough has previously been our friend of the taxpayer, received an award for that in the past. And he gets our nod over Darrell Fleming and Lindsey Brock for the voters in that district. He always votes his conscience. Occasionally we disagree with that, but on money matters, his moral compass unswervingly agrees with ours. Both Mr. Brock and Mr. Fleming impress us as sincerely interested in their constituency, but they have no track record. We urge them to run again after Clay can't in 2015. For the 2011 election, we endorse Clay Yarborough for a second term. In District 2, the taxpayer's choice is Bill Bishop, who is another incumbent. Bill Bishop's philosophy of local government may not always be identical to ours, but he has tremendous dedication to transparency from his fellow council members, which is consistent and refreshing. He's scheduled to serve a year as the city council president during his second term if he's reelected, and we look forward to having reasonable government under that leadership. We agree with Mr. Bishop that his professional employment as an architect brings a needed perspective to the council in urban design that his opponent lacks. He will bring much needed expertise and the highest ethical commitment to his second term. We urge his constituency to re-elect him, and we endorse Bill Bishop in District 2.
That takes us to City Council District 3, taxpayer's choice in this race is Mario Rubio. Real briefly, Richard Clark in this race, the incumbent, has voted against some tax increases, but his actions regarding Trail Ridge landfill no-bid contract extension, his attempt to prevent Jack Webb from serving as council president this year, and his early departure from a particular city council meeting to enjoy an expensive steak dinner with lobbyists after a successful vote on the no-bid contract causes us concerns. Again, Mario Rubio has executive and business experience, and he's old enough where he denies higher political ambition. We believe him. So in this race, Mario Rubio gets our endorsement. He would represent the taxpayers very well.
All right, in District 4, again, there's no contest, so that Don Redmond takes it by default. District 5, which is a crowded race. Don't understand quite why we wind up with no contests in one and crowded races in the other, but our choice there is Steve Hires. He strikes us as a genuine Horatio Alger success story. We had some objections from some of the other candidates in even answering our questions. Jack Daniels, who filed his answers at the very last minute, has run for practically every office that's become available in the last 10 years. So again, we are impressed by Mr. Hires that he's genuinely concerned about taxpayer issues and is not one to part with public funds lightly, so we endorse him in District 5. District 6, presently held by incumbent Jack Webb. We have no endorsement there. We think that we actually wind up with 3 candidates who would have been better served to have been distributed out among the county. We wish that at least one of the other 2 would run against Mr. Juice. They live in the right area. District 7, I'll leave to you, Victor.
All right, District 7, no endorsement. So District 7, we don't have an endorsement, and that's what we have. 8, 9, and 10 are no contest. So if you're unhappy over the next couple years, if you live in that district, consider running. City Council District 11, our taxpayer's choice is Doug Moore. Especially against Ray Holt, the incumbent has an abysmal voting record by any standard, including our own. And so Doug Moore receives our endorsement in District 11. He scored very well. His voting and and he rated very well on our candidate questionnaire, and his interview was very impressive. We also found that Mr. Holt's voting records, it's an open book, and he just has got to go, and that's my personal opinion. And so Doug Moore for District 11.
All right. District 12, our choice happens to be one of our members and a member of the board, Joe Andrews. Not because he's a member of the board, but in this case, we excluded Doyle Carter because he didn't seek our endorsement. Between Joe Andrews and Jim Davis, they both scored very well on fiscal responsibility, but our endorsement goes to Joe Andrews in large part because he has been serving on the True Commission, with an honorable mention to Jim Davis. District 13, which has 4 candidates, again, we believe that 1 or 2 of those candidates probably should have run against somebody else. Meet our general qualifications. They all had very good to excellent fiscal responsibility ratings, and we're going to wait until after March 22nd because we don't believe that there's going to be anybody there who will receive a majority.
All right, and finally, Council District 14, we've co-endorsed Henry Mooneyham and Kendall Bryan with the nearly absurd number of choices in the 6-way race to represent Riverside and Argyle. You know, we've endorsed Henry Mooneyham and Kendall Bryan. Henry Mooneyham impressed us with the perfect score on the rating scale, and Kendall Bryan impressed us with his interview. So either one of Mooneyham or Bryan would keep the concerns of the taxpayers foremost as a city council member. So we co-endorse them both for City Council District 14. With the remaining bit of time we have, we encourage you to go to our website at www.jackstaxpayers.org. If you're interested in getting involved with the group or finding out more information, call us at 904-351-8126. It's 904-351-8126. This was a long process, and we felt it was objective. We give everybody a fair chance, and we stand behind all these endorsements. We didn't endorse people in every race because we only endorsed who we were comfortable with. John, do you have anything you want to add?
The only thing I'd say is that in the case of co-endorsements or non-endorsements, tune in next month because that'll be right after the election on the 22nd, and we will reconsider those in order to give you new results.
Well, thank you for coming to watch us at Tax Watch, brought to you by Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County in partnership with Comcast Cable. Again, please go to our website. We have a YouTube channel with lots of videos of all the candidate interviews that we could get to work, which was most of them. So if there's somebody in the race that you're interested, we encourage you to go and watch their interview. The committee spent, as John mentioned, hundreds of person hours to get this information to you. We've given you all the information. We feel that you can make your own choice about who you want to vote for. We've offered our own recommendations about who we feel would represent the taxpayers the best. But again, we encourage you to read the report, watch the interviews, and look at our candidate questionnaire scoring about who best represents your interest. Thank you for watching Tax Watch. Please go to Mike Hogan for mayor, Dick Kravitz for tax collector, Jim Overton for property appraiser, Council District Group 1, anyone but Taylor, John Crisabini for Group 2, Juan Diaz, Jim Robinson for Group 4, Robin Lum for Group 5, Clay Yarborough District 1, Bill Bishop District 2, Mario Rubio District 3, Stephen Hires District 5, Doug Moore District 11, Joe Andrews District 12, Henry Mooneyham, Kendall Bryan District 14, co-endorsed. Thank you for watching. Out of time. Thank you, folks.